blueprints of what we can scale together. If energy remains the backbone for transformation, then we must also recognize that the challenge is no longer only generation, it is in transmission. Across Africa, new capacity is being added, but without transmission, infrastructure power cannot move efficiently to demand centers. So transmission must now be treated as strategic priority. Private capital has a critical role to play here, just as it has in generation. And regional power trade must move from aspiration to execution. The same logic applies to transport and aviation, where infrastructure, cargo capacity, trade facilitation, and connectivity are aligned. Trade grows faster, tourism deepens, and higher value exports become possible. That is what systems thinking looks like. Not one project at a time, not one integrated ecosystem at a time. Nowhere is the shift from project thinking to systems thinking more visible than in the region hosting us today. Across Eastern Africa, we see a clear pattern, a focus not on constraints, but on building institutions, building markets, building platforms, building systems that connect them. That's why I'm pleased to share today that AFC has reached an agreement with the government of the Republic of Kenya to establish its first regional office here in Nairobi. This is strategic. Nairobi sits at the heart of the region where trade, capital, energy, and industrial opportunity are increasingly interconnected. Establishing a presence here allows us to work more closely with East African governments and partners who are moving from plans to projects and from commitment to capital. It allows us to support what comes next: integrated corridors, regional energy platforms, industrial ecosystems, bankable pipelines, and domestic capital mobilization at scale. And let me at this point acknowledge with deep appreciation the representatives of the government of Kenya who worked alongside Team AFC to negotiate and conclude the host country agreement under the leadership of His Excellency President William Ruto and his economic management team. Please also permit me to thank Team AFC, the board and management of AFC, for their discipline, dedication, and sense of purpose in bringing this summit to life and in helping establish the foundation for our presence here in Nairobi. They have not simply organized an event, they have helped advance an institution's commitment to East Africa and to Africa's future. Your Excellencies, a summit like this should not be judged by the quality of its speeches. It should be judged by the quality of its outcomes. So when we meet next year in Abuja to mark AFC at 20, what must we be able to show for what we began here in Nairobi? We must be able to show that regional projects move from concept to execution. We must be able to show that capital was mobilized for infrastructure, not merely discussed. We must be able to show that reforms advanced to unlock pension, insurance, and domestic institutional capital. We must be able to show stronger coordination around corridors, power systems, industrial platforms, and regional resilience. And we must be able to show that this summit did not end in Nairobi, it began in Nairobi. And when we meet again in 2028 for AFC at 21, we should not merely show or review intentions, we should measure the momentum of what we have built. To measure what we have financed, to measure what we de-risked, to measure what value Africa has retained, to measure how many jobs were created, because African leadership in this room chose to align African resources, African capital, and African institutions around a shared purpose. That is how history is made. Not in declarations, in decisions. Not in applause, in execution. Not in what in promise, but in what we build. Africa has the people, Africa has the resources, Africa has the capital. And in this room, Africa has the leadership and institutions to bring them together. So the question before us is not whether the ingredients exist. They do. The question is whether we will organize them deliberately, courageously, and at scale. Because the future will not be defined by what we say here today. It will be defined by what we build together. Let this summit send another clear message across Africa and to the world. Africa is not waiting for the future. Africa is building now. The Africa our children will inherit will not be the one we hope for, it will be the one we build. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Samaila Zubairu. Our next speaker represents an institution central to Africa's collective vision and long-term agenda. As Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the Africa Union Commission, she is helping to advance the continental priorities that shape Africa's connectivity, resilience, and prosperity. Why don't we give a warm welcome to Her Excellency Lerato Mataboge to come and make her remarks. Karibu sana. Welcome.
Thank you, Program Director. Your Excellency Mzee Yoweri Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda. Your Excellency Dr. William Somei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya. Excellencies, ambassadors here present, the Chairperson of the Board of the African Finance Corporation, Madam Ireti Samuel Ogbu, Mr. Samaila Zubairu, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Finance Corporation, CEOs and members of the AMFI, and other distinguished leaders of financial institutions here present, Dr. Aliko Dangote and captains of industries here present, development partners, friends of Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a privilege to be with you today as we open this inaugural summit anchored on infrastructure as the engine for industrialization, with the purpose of attaining the Africa we want through the Africa we build. On behalf of the African Union Commission, I extend our sincere appreciation to the government of Kenya for its leadership and hospitality, and to the Africa Finance Corporation for convening this important platform. I also convey the greetings and support of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Youssef, who has underscored the importance of this summit as a practical consultative platform that reaffirms our collective commitment to Agenda 2063, which calls for an integrated, a prosperous, and a resilient Africa, powered by its own citizens' efforts and powered by African know-how. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a decisive moment. The global system is shifting, supply chains are being reconfigured, energy systems are being rewritten, capital is becoming more selective. In this environment, Africa cannot afford fragmentation. We must move with clarity, with coordination, and with conviction. The central question before us is not whether Africa should industrialize. It is whether we will organize our infrastructure, our capital, and our policies to make that industrialization inevitable. The status quo is that less than 35% of Africa's roads are paved, contributing to some of the highest logistics costs globally. Rail networks remain limited and often disconnected. Ports and airports exist, but too often they do not function as seamless gateways to regional markets. In energy, millions of African households still lack access to electricity, and many industries continue to operate with fragmented and unreliable power systems. Without dependable energy, industrialization can never take root. Without industrialization, employment can never scale. Excellencies, Africa is not constrained by potential. It is constrained by alignment. We have capital. I think the CEO made the point very emphatically. We have the capital. Africa's domestic capital market, capital base, now exceeds trillions of dollars. We have markets under the African Continental Free Trade Area, but these elements are not sufficiently connected to create productive capacity at scale. This is why we must fundamentally shift how we think about infrastructure. Infrastructure must move from assets to systems, ports, Rail, roads, power, and digital networks must function together as integrated economic corridors that connect production zones to markets. Today, too much of our value still leaves the continent in raw form and returns at a premium. This is not because Africa lacks the resources or the markets, it's because we have not fully aligned infrastructure, capital, and policy to support industrial value chains. That needs to change. We need to move from extraction to transformation, from exporting commodities to building industries, from fragmented national projects to coordinated continental systems. This is the agenda that the African Union is advancing. Through the Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa, we are coordinating cross-border investments in transport, energy, and water systems. Through the Trans-African Highways and the African Integrated Rail Network, we are connecting regions to markets. Through the single air transport market, we are unlocking mobility and trade. Through the African Single Electricity Market and the Continental Power Systems Master Plan, we are building an integrated energy system capable of powering industry at scale. And through the Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa, we are ensuring that digital infrastructure becomes a driver of productivity, innovation, and
Your Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defence Forces, Your Excellency General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, Your Excellency Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs Kenya, Samaila Zubairu, President and CEO of Africa Finance Corporation, all Cabinet Secretaries present, led by Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Honorable Ms. Lerato Matoboge, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy, Africa Union Commission, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, Chairman and CEO of Dangote Group, Dr. George Elombi, President of Afrexim Bank, Tiano Habib Han, CEO Shelter Freak, Admasu Tedese, Group President TDB Bank, Senator Uba Sani, Governor Kaduna State, all Principal Secretaries present, Members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, welcome to Nairobi and welcome to the inaugural Africa We Build Summit. I am privileged to be the Master of Ceremonies this morning. We are delighted to have here what we believe is not simply another conference, but the beginning of a paradigm shift. Why the Africa We Build? Because this is the agency. It is about ambition. It is about Africa taking practical steps to build the future we want with confidence, with purpose, and with urgency.
To our development initiatives, we are looking at how to integrate various infrastructure projects, because I will tell you that corridor does not start at the port. It doesn't start at our airports. It actually starts at the farm. It starts at the factory, and it starts at the production centers. It is how you connect production centers to markets that is what is important. That is why you must also remember, as you do the rails, as you do airways, airports, as you do trunk roads, that feeder roads are equally important. So you must have a system where feeder roads connect to trunk roads connect to meter gauge railway, because standard gauge railway should not be a replacement of meter gauge railway, but should be blending and integrating with meter gauge railway. Then meter gauge railway should lead you to a dry port, which then should connect through SGR to seaports and airports. That is when now you have a corridor that is complete, a corridor that gives value, a corridor that moves you from rhetoric to deliveries, because what we need is not political statements. It's not about rhetoric. It's about delivery. But this requires bold and sometimes uncomfortable decisions have to be made. And therefore, we require bold and courageous leaders in this space. I want to just summarize it by saying that I think the problem that we have been undergoing is that we are trying to do 21st century infrastructure development by using 20th century financing models. That is why we are still thinking about the traditional ways of raising funds. I want to say that this summit could not be more timely. The Africa We Build Summit offers an opportunity to rethink the continent's development finance paradigm by aligning Africa's long-term capital with the continent's vast infrastructure needs. In Kenya, we have already embarked on this transition by shifting away from traditional debt-heavy public financing models and embracing blended investment-led approaches. A key example is the recent establishment of the National Infrastructure Fund, a fund that we have established within an initial capital or seed capital of about $3 billion US, which resources we have sourced or raised from divestiture and privatization of capital assets or public capital assets. This is a fund that is designed to mobilize capital for commercially viable public infrastructure projects. We are trying to optimize the assets that we have, and this is going to help. This infrastructure fund is going to help in project development, in project designs, in project preparation, feasibility study, economic, social, and impact assessment, procurement process, up to execution. We are also advancing other innovative financing mechanisms, including securitization, more particularly in the road sector. This is what we call an intelligent and integrated optimization of the use of our assets. And I want to put it this way, that we are looking at a country, and we are looking at a region, and we are looking at a continent that will use its assets and not rely on others to optimize the use of those assets and to use the proceeds of those assets for risk restructuring and risk reallocation or allocation. I want to also add the last, which is the revitalization of public-private partnership frameworks to attract private sector investment. As I conclude, Your Excellencies, this summit is expected to serve as a launchpad for bold and transformative decisions that will foster stronger collaboration among African governments, investors, and industrialists to mobilize the capital required to develop the infrastructure that will drive Africa's industrialization and long-term prosperity. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, and allow me at this stage to invite the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, who will then invite His Excellency the President.
Your Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, Your Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, ministers and government leaders from across the continent, Madame Lerato Mataboge, AU Commissioner for Infrastructure, Samaila Zubairu, President and CEO of AFC, Aliko Dangote, Chairman and CEO of the Dangote Group, business executives and global partners, leaders of our development financial institutions, ladies and gentlemen. In Africa, the Africa We Build Summit is a profound opportunity to turn potential into action by forging partnerships, unlocking finance, and building continental synergy. Kenya is honored to partner with the Africa Finance Corporation and the African Union Commission to host this inaugural summit, shifting from aspiration and dialogue to execution with clear outputs and implementation pathways. This is a strong start that brings together public and private sector leaders. Today marks a proud moment as we collectively aim to accelerate the mobilization of domestic and international capital towards infrastructure systems that enable large-scale industrialization. Notably, treating infrastructure as a standalone asset delivers little or no impact. Moving priority infrastructure from inception to tangible outcomes across Africa requires an integrated approach, linking roads, railways, ports, power, and digital networks to industrial parks and micro, small, and medium enterprises. This summit is timely for two key reasons. First, it coincides with the growing momentum in realization of the Agenda 2063, particularly the advancement of flagship programs like this Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Second, it takes place amid geopolitical disruptions to global and regional trade. Together, these factors underscore the urgent need for homegrown and proactive resource mobilization to finance